Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWire TV interview. I'm joined today by Vinay Samuel. He's the CEO and founder of instant data analytics company Zetaris. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. Really happy to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Vinay, the story of how you've fundamentally disrupted the analytics, BI, reporting and AI industry is fascinating, and I'm always a huge fan of positive disruption. But before we go into the detail, can you please tell us when Zetaris started and the products and services that you're offering to the market today in 2022?
Great. Thanks a lot, Alex. So we started about 7 years ago out of a garage in Essendon, and today we're selling a unique kind of data platform. You can think of Zetaris as an analytical data platform that enables our users to query data where it lives, right? And the unique thing about Zetaris is that in order to do a decision support or reporting or BI in a big company, and you want to do that analysis across lots of data in different places, what's unique about us is we don't need to store the data in a central database or data warehouse or data lake. We can do data warehouse kind of queries wherever the data is and join it all in real time. And so we call that the Zetaris networked data platform. It's quite an innovation. It's taking the world by storm. We're now in America. We're across Asia, and it's targeted at tier one banks, telcos, retailers, governments, any company that's got lots of data in different places, and they want to avoid the pain of bringing that data together and the cost of doing that, and increase the speed of analytics within their business.
Yeah, well, being fast and not having to duplicate data and worrying about that and storing it somewhere where it's vulnerable to attack and all that sort of stuff. I mean,
Absolutely.
that is a genuine improvement. And, I guess that's why you've been in business for 7 years and improving it all the time. But I wanted to know, as we're recording this, it's the 50th anniversary of Atari. And of course, Zetaris and Atari sound similar. So what's the story behind the name?
Oh, it's quite a corny story, I should say. So, look, we started, as I said earlier, in a garage in Essendon, and at one time we had a bunch of programmers sitting there, and we were trying to work out what do we call this new technology that we were building that, quite frankly, for analytical applications simply didn't exist before Zetaris invented it and brought it to the world. And the first concept was, look, it helps you to do a virtual database or virtual data lake. And we were actually going to call it a virtual data warehouse company, right? Mm-hmm. And then we landed on this networked data platform idea that actually it networks data and enables you to join data without moving it. And lots of conversation about what will we call this thing. And one of our developers started thinking about zettabyte scale data, right? That actually, if you can join data in different places across the internet, you actually can address massive data sets in real time. So the idea of Zeta came up. And then, funnily enough, someone said, hey, Vinay, you're a guitarist in a band. And they kind of married this idea of a zettabyte guitarist together. And initially I was actually against it, but they convinced me that, hey, it's a unique name, and it kind of adds a little bit of culture about our business where we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we're committed to really creating amazing things, and also a little bit about the technology we've developed, a zettabyte scale technology. So
and was it also because the .com was available?
Absolutely, yeah, it was a lot easier.
Well, having a unique name is always a handy thing, yeah. Now, you did mention already a couple of times that you started in the garage, which is where a lot of famous tech companies started, even, HP, Apple, a lot of companies. But, what are some of the stories you can tell about the journey you've taken and the roles you've had in adulthood since you arrived in Australia from India at the age of 7 years old?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of my background, I was really at a very young age, when I was about, about 14, maybe 12 years old, when I ran into a Commodore 64 computer and learned BASIC. So I learned how to program just to do some fun things on what I thought was an amazing thing, which was a computer. So I fell in love with computing at an early age, and And to cut a long story short, I ended up working for a company called Teradata, which is still a great company today, doing data warehousing. So data warehousing, for those who don't know, is what banks, telcos, retailers, all the big companies do to bring data together and centralize data so they can cross-analyze it. You can compare different things in your business. And so I joined Teradata, having the strong interest in data and technology. And I ended up becoming a GM level business development resource. And then from there, I actually got really interested in changing the way data was analyzed. And I went through a couple of traditional data centralization companies. So companies like Netezza, Greenplum, and Vertica, they all had different capabilities that improved the ability to bring data together. And so my career up until about 7 years ago was all about how do you centralize data to make it easier for businesses to do risk scoring or analytical marketing and so on and so forth using data. And then it was the biggest flip I've ever done. And that is, what if you didn't bring the data together? What if you actually stopped having, all that time it takes and armies of people to copy and paste data into a central data warehouse and then recode it? So there's a lot of duplication in doing centralization. Double handling of the data. So, whilst my career was in these large corporates, great technology companies. I worked for HP, who acquired Vertica, and whilst it's all about centralization, that taught me, really what it taught me was centralization was broken. The idea of bringing data together for data warehousing physically was broken, and that's where this concept of what if you could do data warehouse type of queries but not have to store it or duplicate it and not have that big human effort of migrating data. So yeah, that's kind of like the background and sort of the road towards this innovation.
Well, that moment of insight must have obviously been a light bulb going off. I mean, technology has always been about centralization, decentralization. When my father was working in the public service in the late 70s, early 80s, they had these Wang dumb terminals that were all centralized to a server somewhere. And of course, the PC was all about decentralizing, and the internet has been all about decentralizing. So you must have seen this and clearly you had that moment of insight, and here we are today.
Yeah, it's an interesting comment, and it has been a cyclical thing where depending on the technology opportunity at the time, whether it's AI or machine learning, or back in the day when I first started, was all about enterprise data warehousing. Depending on the state of technology, the capabilities that are available, people rethink or reinvent how we achieve those outcomes, those analytical decision support reporting, BI outcomes. And my true belief is that we're heading very quickly towards a world where it actually not only becomes too costly, or which it is today, it's very costly to do centralized warehousing or very costly to store all your data in one place in the cloud. Not only does it become too costly, it actually becomes physically prohibitive. And from a time perspective, it just becomes something you can't do if you want to get a single view of your business in a centralized model. So if you think of the proliferation of data across networks, if you think of a telco that now has lots of data under their telco towers, right across their network, not necessarily in a central data center in the cloud, more and more as we go forward in time, data is proliferating everywhere on customer devices, on IoT devices. And so that's why we see a really strong future. And so do the analysts like Gartner and Forrester have come out and said this model in terms of centralization or data lake or data warehouse as a physical construct, you have to store it, is becoming more and more problematic. So our capability, the Zetaris Network Data Platform, that says you can have a central view without having to centrally store things, I think that's absolutely a sustainable model, and something that I think ourselves and some of our competitors, frankly, are going to enjoy over the next 5 or 6 years as it becomes a mainstream capability that enterprises take up.
Yeah, well, it's clearly revolutionary. And, we see the centralization and decentralization thing happening even today with our phones. For the past number of years, every time you wanted to talk to Siri or Google Assistant or Alexa, it has to go off to some central server somewhere and convert that and send it back to you. It's got to do it within milliseconds. Well, in iOS 15, Apple announced the ability for Siri to do all of its transcription on device. So you used to be able to say, hey Siri, turn on. I can see my devices listening to me all of a sudden now. Turn on plane mode, and then that used to be a one-way trip. But now, because it's all done on device, you can ask Siri to turn plane mode off, and also all of the transcription is all done on the device. So everything is so much faster, which is exactly what you want, and it's one of the benefits you give as well.
Yeah, what you're describing there, Alex, is we are being trained by these new technologies or these new capabilities. We've been trained to expect real-time or near real-time outcomes, right? More and more the consumer, the customer, doesn't care if you've got some sort of technology problem in your data center. You're my bank, and I want you to help me make this decision right now with all of the available data. And I don't care if you've got some sort of problem with your data warehousing.
Yeah.
Right? We've been trained to believe that. And what's lucky now for existing enterprises is that the sophistication behind AI and automation is actually pretty low. And so therefore, what we're seeing in terms of the automation capabilities and what you talked about in terms of Siri coming up with answers for us, actually fairly low level processing challenges. However, over time, our expectations are going to go up. We'll want our device to give us financial advice. We'll want our device to not only help us, navigate a road trip, but give us a lot more on the way. Tell us, book things for us as we travel, for instance, right? And when you start to get into a move away from what's called verticalized AI to a more generic thinking machine, you need to be able to have the data available to facilitate that kind of more deeper analysis and deeper decision support. Have that data available in real time, almost like a nervous system, rather than a storage system. So we see ourselves at Zetaris, our networked data platform, that ability to join data in different places, as in terms of the future, as the nervous system behind smart AI, behind generic AI, as we head towards, I think all the big futurists like Musk and others are predicting by 2030, 2040, we will have that general AI that will demand a much deeper connection to data in different places and a real-time view of that data. So for all of those reasons, we think the future is really promising for Zetaris and our capabilities.
I always like to say that unless there's a nuclear, medical, financial, or environmental catastrophe, the future is really bright. And and also, the actual hardware itself has developed to such an extent that, that AI can't be centralized somewhere. It's got to be with us on our devices, and our devices now have that power. But after being an enterprise level tech executive and CEO, founding your own startup, which is always a challenging decision. You had to do that, but you also had to turn down $1 million salary. So just tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, let's just say $1 million salary package, right? And some of these great tech companies have awesome opportunities in terms of career development. I reached a point in my career where I really felt compelled to implement and directly facilitate change within enterprises, right? So I went for 20 years in all the big data companies, HP, NCR, Teradata, and I could see customers suffering from the same thing. And that was too much data in too many different places, armies of people trying to do these big 18-month projects, failing, starting again, the data quality is terrible. And so it really struck me between the eyes that, I could have a career in big corporate and they'll be great and I'll end up with some sort of superannuation package and that'll be awesome. Or I could actually make a mark. I could actually be true to the problem that I see in front of me and try and address it and make the life of the data scientist, the data analyst, and the business person making a decision, make their lives better and faster. And as I said, potentially affect the nature and the trajectory of innovation behind AI. that for me felt like a much better life plan than sitting in a big corporate, to be quite frank. And yeah, that excited me. And luckily enough, I've got a wife that's also a betting person and someone who supports me really well. And when we sat down and looked at this opportunity at Zetaris and the potential, not just for ourselves, but also for the people around us, the people who believed in the concept, it wasn't a decision. It was a no-brainer to walk away from that kind of offer, if you like.
It sounds like it's much easier to make a dent in the universe when your destiny is in your own hands as opposed to in some big corporate.
It's funny you should say that, because one of my early learnings and early mottos is control your own destiny or someone else will. And that's not my thing. It's a guy called Jack Welch. I actually worked for GE. That was my first job. And I remember reading his books, and I've always been a believer that, life gives you this opportunity of either following or creating. And that, so I've been a big believer in the whole thing about controlling your destiny.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've got to take it in your own hands, and you've been doing that, and it's a 7 years journey, and let's hope it goes for at least another 70, I
think it will. And you know what? I just want to, as we close out, I want to say it's really not about me. One thing I have done well is build an amazing team and an amazing board. Okay. And so, we can talk about controlling your own destiny or having some sort of impact or dent on the future. You can't do that without great people supporting you, guiding you, advising you. And, people on our board are just amazing people. And so if there's one learning I've learned is, and what I would tell listeners or potential entrepreneurs out there is, once you've got your great idea, find some great people to help you validate it, develop it, maybe potentially tell you that you're smoking dope and it's not going to work, right? Or help you build it. And I was lucky enough to attract amazing people like Rob McLean, who's our chairman, amazing person, one of the McKinsey alumni, Dave Whiting, who was the CIO of the Commonwealth Bank, Devin Billamoria, who built Smart Group, ASX billion-dollar business, Will Dean, probably I'm not going to say probably, so that's terrible, the best VC in the world in terms of capability to look at something really small and help you create that roadmap towards something that can be much bigger. And that's what our whole board's done for us. So my advice to people listening in terms of what's the hidden secret, what's the secret recipe, and that is, it's not necessarily just you. It's finding that team, that board, that community of people that jumps on board with the idea and helps you move it forward.
And, with Asia, a hotbed of innovation and, obviously plenty of opportunities in India as well, you chose Australia as the place to grow. I mean, obviously got roots here and all that sort of stuff, but, what was part of the decision for saying, we're going to build in Australia?
Yeah, great question. So number one, I'm an Aussie of Indian heritage, right? I'm a very loyal, proud Australian. And, I worked for my whole career, apart from Zetaris, was helping big American companies bring their technology to Asia by me being the vice president here in Asia and representing them. And there was always a little bit of a chip on my shoulder thinking, why is it that great tech has to come from somewhere else, where we seem to be bringing it into Asia and in some cases fixing it, right? Because it didn't work or there was problems in it. So look, I think there are great technology. I know there are great technologists in this region. When I started the company, there was the decision, where do we put it? Do we go to Singapore? And I couldn't ignore the fact that great tech comes from Australia, comes from Melbourne and Sydney as well. And so we're an Australian company now. We're setting up in America, and we globalizing the business. And I think we'll call ourselves a global business very soon. We're getting a lot of help from our friends and investors in the States. So I don't want to discount how important it is to have an international view, but definitely, proud to be Australian. And I think there's a lot of support for entrepreneurs here with the government schemes. The other thing I'll say is Australia is a hard market to break into when you're an emerging tech company. And that, you might think, so why do you pick Australia then? Well, I think it's a great proving ground. You get really direct, hard feedback. The general buyer in Australia is not skeptical, but very, very I guess what's the word for it? Very
discerning or determined to
determined to find exactly what your tech is, and what's the truth of your tech. The scrutiny is the word, right? So highly devoted to scrutiny. And I actually felt that was a good thing for Zetaris, because we've managed to put our technology into banks, telcos, retailers, even local government. We've had aspects of our capability used and put under some extreme scrutiny. So great proving ground, great market to develop your chops. And now we've built something that's not just validated but enterprise ready, and gone through a baptism of fire in a tough market like Australia. Now we're going to America. We're winning deals with banks, telcos, and retailers again. And I see a future as we develop our footprint in America, where the journey towards ultimate maturity of this business will be underpinned by the fact that we've already gone through a tough growing up period in Australia. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. And, they often say that to make it big in Australia, you have to make it big overseas. So it's really good to see that mold is broken.
I do believe so. I think Atlassian proved that out as well, right? In what they've achieved, and Canva and others. And so I think the world is starting to pay more attention to Australia as a technology center. I think that we've got a bit of a way to go. Definitely, I would encourage further support by government and all the big, bodies out there that look at entrepreneurship within the region. To bring in more capital, to attract more talent, to stop the leakage of talent. I still think we do have a little bit of leakage because it's just so tempting to take your idea and go somewhere else where you think that there's more capital available. But I think the world is starting to see what Australian technologists can achieve, and I think that's going to help change the opportunity. I believe it's getting easier, notwithstanding the economic environment. The moment is pretty tough as well. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned banks and retail and telcos. Are there any specific customers locally or globally that you want to highlight?
Yeah, look, a couple of, I think we've got, a great opportunity at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, where we're helping them in their Gen V program, and we help them with their data platform, bringing data together from different systems. And I call them out, less about Zetaris, more about them. They're doing some amazing things in terms of research for children and discoveries that actually will totally change the lives of human beings, not just in Victoria, but across Australia and the globe, in terms of using data to find hidden patterns that point to problems that children have and ultimately adults experience. So the Gen V program is a 40-year longitudinal study, which we're involved in, and it's just amazing to be involved in that. And data touches everything, right? And data helps you understand not just businesses, but ecosystems, environments, and healthcare, and all of that kind of thing. So that's a great example. We've got two of the big telcos here in Australia, helping them, one with their data exchange initiative, which is all about bringing data together in different places within their business, joining it to data in their business customers' environment to create new insight, new opportunities. Also for banks, it's things like regulatory reporting. Mind you, let me tell you, let's make it a lot more simpler. We're winning a lot of work just making it easier for business users to be able to trawl and analyze data in the data lake and across the data warehouse. So a common theme for us is the business people saying, look, we've got lots of data, but we can't get to it. Zetaris, can you help us? Absolutely. So we'll create a query layer across different data stores, whether it's a Databricks data lake or a Snowflake data warehouse, and create that single semantic view that the business people, they understand those words or those semantics, and they can query it in a way that is much faster. They don't need a technical resource using Zetaris, because Zetaris is a no-code decentralized data platforms for the business person as much as it is for a technology person. So that's one use case that's really interesting, just helping people get to the data. The other one is actually bringing down the cost of cloud, which you might think, how does that work? Well, what we do is when you put Zetaris in between your users and the cloud, Zetaris learns where the data is, and it also learns the type of queries those users are writing, and it gets rid of the duplicate requests, gets rid of the duplicate data, consolidates the data in the processing, and stops multiple similar queries. And ultimately, we've seen large companies experience up to 30 to 40% reduction in their cloud spend, because they're saying, we're going through a conduit that can understand our workload and optimize it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm hearing is that you don't have to ditch all the investment in all the things you've already got. Zetaris sits on top of that and just radically improves how you can use all those existing resources
100%,
and cuts all those costs.
Yeah, that is such an important issue. This is an overlay. There's no rip and replace with Zetaris. It's all about optimizing what you've got as your legacy. It's all about what we call architectural optionality. So what that means is you as a business can decide how you make your decisions on what data, wherever it is. You're not sitting back and saying, I've got a new initiative, I need some data, so I've got to spin up some new machines, move everything into a new system, and 18 months later, I've got a view of this new project. What you're doing is instantly accessing data in different places, instantly joining it, resolving all the business rules that you need to make sense of it, and you're answering your question when you need it. You're getting rid of that time it takes, or that friction that's created when you're actually trying to physically bring data together.
So tell me briefly about the customer onboarding journey. They come to you, you say, right, well, we can help you with all of these different sources of data. Every company is obviously different, and they've all got different infrastructures, but what is kind of like a generalized time to return on investment where they can suddenly get all this granular access to data that they never had before, and they're doing something in a week, 2 weeks, a month? What's this, instead of 18 months, what does it come down to?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So we show case studies to our customers that typically, on average, if that makes sense, shows a 1/6 comparison to what they'd expect doing a data project in a traditional way. So if it's going to take you 6 weeks to do something in the traditional way, which is using what they call ETL, extract, translate, load, or moving data into a big database on the cloud, and that traditional model of migrating data, if it takes 6 weeks, we'll take 1 week. That's typically what our case studies are showing. And that difference in time is to do with the fact that if you leave data where it was created or where it is, then you don't have to go through really complex transformation of that data or recoding it so that when you bring it together, you can join it. What you do is that joining of the data, or that translation of the data, is done logically, not physically. And that means a lot less work. It means you don't need to remodel it. You actually model it as you use it. And we've got an AI engine that helps you automate some of the modeling of the data. And when I mean modeling, it's actually a fairly simple concept. It just means things like, if you've got 2 different systems and they both have the idea of customer in it, just making sure that those 2 things that are called customer is actually the same thing. Yeah. Right. So for a bank, you might have 2 systems where customer actually means partner or associate. It's not, it's a business rule. And the other system, customer may mean someone with a credit card. Another system, customer may mean someone with a mortgage, right? So just when you do these projects that centralize data, all of those rules are very complex. And if you're saying, I can't query it, until I've loaded everything, I've transformed everything, recoded everything, massaged it all together. That's where all the time is spent. So what we do is we apply AI, we apply what's called a reference industry model. And then on top of that, we keep the data where it is so you don't have to physically move it. All of those things save time, save money. So about a third of the cost as well. So we can show case studies where, someone expecting to pay, $1 million to do a data project will now start looking at about 300 grand, 200 grand to do that same data project. We think there's even further reduction in cost if you fully engage in the AI aspect. But that comes when you've got a mature implementation of Zetaris, right? Because our AI engines have to learn over time. Ultimately, if you're leaving data where it is, and you're the way you do that is by centralizing metadata, not data. So metadata is like a map of where the data is in the business rules. If you're able to do that in a way that's governed and it has a reference model, so a map of how that data should look like for your industry, we say to our customers, when you use our network data platform to implement a virtual data warehouse or virtual view across all of your data sources, we stand very close to and strongly to the idea that you'll get to 100% data quality. Because for us to do what we do, we do it with metadata, and it's business rules led. So we actually resolve those rules that create the mistakes if you get them wrong.
Well, I mean, I was going to say with 100% data quality, you don't have the conversion errors, data loss. There's just all that stuff's eliminated.
You're right on. A lot of data quality issues are made in the project. They're not necessarily data quality issues in the source systems. I mean, we do, in a complex environment like a big bank, you'll have source systems that spit out data in the wrong formats or have mixes of data types or whatever. But the biggest problems I see in data quality is in the transformation, in the way they actually bring the data and rewrite and recode it, and they make mistakes. Whereas in our model, the very fact that we are a virtualized scenario or a decentralized platform, we need to get those rules absolutely right before we even run the query, right? And that's where we've applied AI, reference models, and our framework to enable that.
Well, look,
to simply answer your question, I'll give you an example. Large telco in Australia looking down the barrel of a 12-month project to do a centralized data lake. We came around, we got them into the first part of that journey. So that first 12 months, we did that in 3 weeks. Okay. And so what did we do? We said to them, you don't need to, number one, centralize the data into a big set of infrastructure. So you don't have to build this infrastructure. You don't have to tune it. We'll just connect to all the different sources. It was 75 data sources. We automatically ingested the metadata from those sources. So the data about that data and about that system, we put it into our central, what we call schema store. And then we applied a reference model. And then we enabled some architects to refine that model using what we call virtual data pipelining for their use cases. And all of that, within this 3-week period. Mind you, within that 3 week, the longest thing that took for us, or the thing that soaked up most of the time, was actually proving the security capabilities within our system to their SecOps people. It's ordered of magnitude faster in terms of time to analytic. And then within our system, we've got a query optimizer that speeds up query processing. So using Zetaris compared to natively accessing data, you'll see a massive improvement in query performance. We see typically a 10x improvement just in the performance of the query.
These are the kind of results that you want to hear that you'll get from a truly disruptive solution. I mean, that must have been blown away.
Absolutely. Not just blown away. I'll give you an example. I've got to be careful about client confidentiality,
Sure.
But a large telecommunications company in Australia, again, are very much involved in selling internet connectivity. When we ran our benchmark, when they first ran a set of queries to test us, they actually didn't believe that we ran the query within like a query that took 3 hours running in 30 seconds within Zetaris. Now, these are analytical queries, right?
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
expect them to take a long time.
Yeah.
They didn't believe that we actually ran the query unless
you somehow faked it, right?
Yeah, somehow, the query stopped. They thought the query stopped because it didn't work. And our engineers said, well, go look at the answer set file and ask yourself, is that the right answer?
Yeah.
And when they looked at it, they said, actually, the query didn't stop. It resolved. It solved the business problem. It actually came up with the answer. And the reason for that is, why is our system so fast? You would think if it's decentralized and not centralized, what's going on here? There's a couple of things. We've built the world's only analytical query engine for decentralized platforms, right? So we've got a few competitors who do do decentralized platform joining, but they haven't got the query engine, right? And that query engine is the brain that has a number of capabilities in it, including the ability to do what's called rules-based, cost-based, and heuristics-based query optimization. Right? It's looking at what a user wants and works at the fastest path to that data and back. The other thing it does is, in an intelligent way, it actually works out what part of the data set or part of the query needs to be cached into memory temporarily to actually create super fast speed. And that caching ability also is applied to when you've got many users running the same query. The system goes, hang on, we've got 100 users running the same query. Let's just save the answer somewhere. Let's not just keep running that query. So there's a lot of IP within our brain, within the Zetaris query optimizer, that also speeds up the technology and the outcomes. So what does it all mean for customers? Customers who want to build a data warehouse, a data lake, can improve their performance tenfold. They can reduce their time to actually delivering the solution by 6x. And from a cost perspective, I believe there's a much deeper cost savings in terms of cost avoided. But from direct cost perspective, we will stand by. It'll be a third of the cost of you doing it the current deemed way that the industry is trying to do it from a physical model.
Well, look, as we get towards the end of the interview, I've got 3 or so more questions. Now, the third last one is, how do you see Zetaris evolving over the next couple of years? And but then how do you see the industry and its need for your products and services, in the 2030s, when the metaverse should be everywhere and, extended reality glasses should be as commonplace as the smartphones and tablets that we use today?
So let me tell you, this might surprise you, but I actually think the way we evolve and move forward at Zetaris is that we actually become the best friend of the existing players, right? And we're already talking to great companies like Snowflake, Databricks.
They need you.
Well, you see, let me tell you, right? Snowflake is an amazing technology. When I've got a strong background in data warehousing for many years, and when I looked at what they've done, that idea of separating the compute from the storage and that cloud elasticity behind data warehousing, I think it's amazing. What our technology does to Snowflake is extend Snowflake's reach into any data anywhere, right? So we have a proposition that we're bringing to market, and we'll be doing this with Snowflake. We're a Snowflake partner. The proposition we're bringing to market is to embed Zetaris with Snowflake and call it Snowstorm, right? And that's basically saying let it snow anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if you've got a Snowflake instance and you're running Snowflake, and then you've got 5 or 6 other data stores, and for some reason you haven't yet put it into Snowflake, it may be regulatory, right? You can join that in real time and make it all look as though it's in the Snowflake instance, and use Zetaris to query it, or Zetaris as a thin layer between whatever your preferred tool is and Snowflake. We think what that does is extend Snowflake's ability to actually expand within the enterprise. Right. And one of the big, I'm using Snowflake as an example, that it could be any of the big data platform players that are out there, even Palantir, Teradata, Databricks, all great companies. So my answer to you is we see ourselves as becoming the piping behind data. You remember I talked about that nervous system behind AI. So that smart AI or general AI.
Artificial general intelligence.
Artificial general intelligence. I was trying to remember what the term is. Artificial general intelligence needs a data nervous system. So we are becoming that data nervous system behind AI. We will be the data piping. I don't think there's a future where any organization will have all their data in one place. That's not the future. It really isn't. It's if you just look at the universe of data today, it's like the physical universe or the planetary universe. It's expanding. It's not contracting. So I really think it's a great opportunity for us to actually be embedded in great existing technology players to help them connect to data anywhere and not take anything away from them in terms of their ability to provide value to their customers and make money. It's actually taking their compute, their IP and their logic into the enterprise. And that's what we represent to some of the big data platform players. So very excited about that. Very excited about AI and the need for artificial general intelligence to have access to all the data, not just the data within that model's purview or whatever. I really see embedding. The other thing is with Zetaris comes the need to clearly document, understand, and profile out and implement your business logic. So I see a future where we will be, and we are today, working with some of the great SIs. You know, we've got relationships with all the big names that are out there. I don't want to mention a few because I might insult some of them, but we've got a list of about 30 big SIs who are all over us because there is a need to get the project right. Okay, and then finally, I see a future which is being launched very soon. We're launching a business apps marketplace. So rather than, hey, Zetaris, give me your platform because I want to do a revenue assurance at my telco. How about, hey, Zetaris, can I buy a revenue assurance app from you? So we're launching a data business apps marketplace. Those apps will be developed by Zetaris initially. We'll kick off some apps, but we're enrolling community members, people who are subject matter experts in their domain. So whether you're a risk expert or you might be a telco expert, a banking expert, you can now go to the Zetaris marketplace. And we're launching this in the last quarter of this year. You'll go to the Zetaris marketplace, fill out a form, register as a subject matter app developer, business subject matter app developer, and you'll be able to build out your app and sell it on that marketplace. And behind that business app, how does that app get to the data? Through Zetaris. Yeah. So there's three big things. It's embedding into the existing technology ecosystem, engaging the SIs, great services companies to help our customers leverage this much faster. And then finally, making Zetaris available to the development community through our community marketplace. So as you said earlier, the future is bright.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this sounds like it's the innovation the industry needed to really get to the next level. And, I mean, the only thing you need now is quantum computing to take it even faster.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. So just think about this as a final thought, right? One of the things I've seen is this continuous search by every company I've ever met. Like I've worked in America for worked with companies like Walmart and AT&T through Teradata when I was there, or here in Australia, the banks, or whether it's ICICI Bank in India. I've consulted to all of these companies about data. And one thing I've seen is they're always on the search for the next best data platform, the next best database. What's the next best thing? And every time they run into something that's really great and really compelling, there's this massive effort to move because they're going to migrate all their data. If they do their project through Zetaris, what they ultimately do is they separate the business logic from the engine. So you can just repoint that logic to the new engine. So if quantum computing suddenly becomes mainstream for data warehousing, then guess what? It's not this big 18-month migration of all your rules and your transformation specs or whatever. It's just repointed.
Yeah.
And so, a finishing thought is that one of the hidden benefits behind the Zetaris Network Data Platform is the decoupling of the business logic from the database engine or the storage engine. And once you decouple it, then you take away all of that future migration pain, and you you ensure the survivability of your current project and the benefit of that current project towards the future 10 or 100 projects you're going to do in data, regardless of innovation that vendors are bringing in terms of new platforms.
I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but when you're talking about decoupling the engine from the business logic, I'm thinking of decoupling the driver from the driving experience. You're in the Tesla car and it's driving you, except that instead of driving you into the wall, it's doing it properly. It's like the Tesla car of 20 years where we don't have to think about it.
Yeah. One of my friends who advises me a lot actually said to me, "You're building AI for data management." Because one of the benefits of Zetaris as well, as you build out these, what we call virtual data pipelines, you're actually documenting tacit knowledge that the business has about their business with respect to their data, and you're documenting it within our virtual data pipeline. What happens over time is you end up with hundreds and thousands of these pipelines supporting your applications and talking to your data. Well, guess what? You end up with an AI reference data set that enables you to now use the past pipelines to predict how to build the next pipeline.
Future pipelines, yeah.
The future pipeline. And what happens eventually, in my mind, is these pipelines self-build. Eventually, all you'll be telling Zetaris is, I need this kind of application, please go do it. And because it has that memory, that IP memory of the data landscape and the business and how business users use the data, you start to automate the build. And that's where we're heading. That's one of the other futures we see. AI for information management is another big thing that we'll see, or you'll see Zetaris bringing to market. We've got the building blocks of it at the moment. We've got a version of it that can be implemented. It's an exciting time to be in data.
It's like no code on steroids, where the code is building itself.
Yeah. So, if you look at any no-code application, there's still an effort. There's still an interaction with a human being. There's still the mapping out of logic, and in many cases, there's still coding. No code is like no SQL. It's less code, right?
Yeah.
I see a future where our platform means no effort. The system learns the landscape. The system learns where the data is, has reference maps, knows what the business user tacit knowledge is, and marries that to a reference model, and then propagates the pipelines.
Well, you just have to make sure that, as with AI, it can't be a black box. The system always has to be able to explain itself to humans. So just make sure you include that in the system when it's building itself.
Absolutely. And so that's why our tech, the core of it is the schema store, which is basically a business rules engine.
Yeah.
And everything is logged. All of these pipelines or transformation rules are clear and visual. When you look at Zetaris, it's actually a beautiful application to look at. It's not all codey. So we're very purposeful about that. And to bring it back to today, one of the biggest things that everyone's talking about is this idea of a data mesh within a company, right? So data mesh being a different architectural approach and a different operating model, where you say, rather than having a centralized data warehouse, and all my data in the one place, and I have a data team and they produce some stuff. You say, each of my business groups sets up a data domain, and each business group with their domain builds products and shares those products, right? And that's a great architectural structure. What we bring to that is we say, why do you have to do that physically? You don't have to keep, just because you're one business group and you're another, you don't have to have your own,
you don't have to re-silo the thing after decades of unsiloing, Don't
what we say is you can have your data domain, but leave the data wherever it is, but just have a virtual view of the data through Zetaris. So data mesh is an immediate thing for us. We've built a data mesh application on top of the Zetaris network data platform, and we enable the data mesh without all of the duplication that potentially can come out of a data mesh project. And that's exciting for us as well.
So my second last question is, what is some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today?
Yeah, probably the first thing that comes to mind, I can't remember who it was that gave me this, but could even be my father. It is that it doesn't have to be perfect, right? When you're building a company or a startup is a group, this idea that a startup is a group of people in search of a company, that means that you're there to experiment, you're there to learn, you're there to make mistakes. And if you're going to wait for perfection, guess what? You're going to miss the opportunity. That's number one for me. The other thing I mentioned earlier, it's not about you. It's about the opportunity. It's about a time window to fulfill that opportunity, because everyone can have a great idea, but not everyone gets that idea up in the amount of time. So remember that it's a community thing. It's a team. It's a board. It's people who believe in you for me, I learned the power of creating that team. Lots of my friends say to me, Vin, if you're smart about one thing, and that is finding great people to build this thing with you, and making sure you're not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the smartest guy in the room at Zetaris. I was lucky enough to fall on the problem space and the idea first, but we've got some amazing people that I think I've been quite skillful at attracting and keeping.
You've been blessed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what is your final message to iTWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
Yeah, so look, I'm going to keep it at data. So the data world is changing, right? And over the last 20 years, I've seen cycles of innovation. And in the middle of each cycle, the community in the data world starts to believe that this is it, right? I started in the 90s, and I remember many times, this is it. Data warehousing is it. Single view data warehouse is it. And then it suddenly changed, and it was Hadoop. The central data lake is it, right? Then it was streaming data warehouse is it. Now it's the cloud data warehouse is it. My strong advice to people watching is, data engines, data innovation is going to be here forever, right? What you've got to do is build an architecture that copes with that change. Right now, most industries, or what I've seen in my life, is that enterprises don't have an architecture to cope with that ever-changing environment where vendors are continually bringing new ideas, new innovation. I strongly believe this idea of a decentralized platform where you separate the business logic from where the data is being processed and managed, that is a big step towards managing an ever-changing engine environment, data landscape. So, what is Zetaris about? It's about saying you don't have to centralize the data, but more so you keep the business rules away, the business rules of business logic, you keep it in a centralized system, which is Zetaris, and enable through understanding those business rules, enable yourself to be able to query any data anywhere, and that'll give you all sorts of optionality, cost reduction, and speed to market. Like the final thought I'll give you is, just last week I had a customer say to me, Vin, we've implemented Zetaris across 30 data sources. We actually discovered 3 which we didn't know we were going to have a couple of weeks ago. Had we have gone with the physical implementation either in a data cloud, in a data warehouse somewhere, had we had totally committed to just a physical data lake, we would have to remodel the whole thing. It'd be another 6 months before we could bring those data sources in. We brought those data sources in on the day we discovered them. So the data world is changing. Everything I've said doesn't mean cloud data warehouses, data lakes are not relevant. They're relevant for many reasons, right? Which I won't cover now. There is a new opportunity to bring data together in a very different way without moving it. I think you should learn it, get deep in it, and I hope I've convinced you that it actually has a big role to play in the future of data warehousing and the cloud data world.
Look, anything that can make coping with and actually thriving from change, and so you can actually move quickly and turn on a dime, which is always supposed to be hard for big enterprises to do. Well, that's a godsend. So no wonder you're having such success.
Absolutely, Alex. Look, we've got a lot to do. We're globalizing the company, lots of scaling challenges and hiring people and all of that. So it's not as though it's a ride without turbulence and,
sure.
and some tough challenges. But I've got to say, since we came with the first level of our product, which was about 2 years ago. It took us about 5-6 years, maybe 18 months ago. It's been a blast. The market is recognizing we're onto something. So yeah, it's exciting, and it's great Australian tech.
Well, Vinay Samuel, CEO and founder of Zetaris, thank you very much for your time. It's fascinating to learn about it. And in my job, I'm always learning about, like everybody else, that they're new technologies and just the level of innovation and the amazing developments. This is something that's next level. So it's really a pleasure to learn about it. And I hope we can talk again in the future.
Cheers, Alex. Thank you so much for your questions. That was great fun. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.